Hello, my name is Bernie Thompson, and in this video we're going to take a look at this 2005 Ford F-150. This F-150 has a problem. The check engine light is illuminated. Now the vehicle has already been to the shop with a check engine light. The shop looked at the car, cleared the code and let it go. Now the car is back as a redo for the shop. The problem is the check engine lamp is illuminated for a code for an evap leak. Now, evap leaks can be tough for all of us. Sometimes they're not so easy to find. What we need to do is first find out, is the car leaking or is the car not leaking, and figure out how to fix the car. In order to do this, we're going to use a revolutionary tool from Automotive Test Solution. This tool is the Bullseye leak detector. The Bullseye leak detector can find very small leaks down to 1/1000th of an inch. So what we're going to do is put this tool on the car, and we're going to try to find out what's wrong with the car. We want to make sure that it doesn't come back to this shop's bays again. The first thing that we need to do on this Ford is to find the purge control valve. Now on this Ford, the purge control valve is located right by the brake booster in the master cylinder. You can see the green cap, which indicates that we have a service port. Now the service port will allow us a point of entry so we can pressurize this evaporative system to see if a leak is present or not. Let's go ahead and put the adapter on. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the system. We want to remove the green cover cap that seals the service port to the evap system. We want to take the special fitting that will screw onto the service port and depress the Schrader valve. This will allow us to put pressure into the system. We're going to take the CO2 charge line and we're going to connect it. Now this allows us the ability to put pressure into the system. The valve is the purge, and we're going to want to get into the back of these wires so we can control this with the ATS Smart Control. We will also need to get into the vent solenoid in the rear of the car so we can close it. We need to get into the purge valve. In order to control the purge valve, we have two wires. One of the wires is power and one is control. One goes to a fuse, the other goes to the PCM. The smart control leads will need to be back probed into these two wires. Once we're into the wires, the smart control lead will figure out which is the control wire, and then it will be able to apply the solenoid through it. It's quite simple. All we've got to do is back probe the system. Once we've got it back probed, we're ready to go. This is the ATS Smart Control box. Now on this box, we've already connected the blue wires to the purge control solenoid. We need to connect the yellow wires to the vents, so we're going to need to raise the car. But there's a couple of things we want to do before we raise the car. First, we want to connect the power leads to the vehicle's power system so we can power the unit. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Now that we have power indicated by the power lamp, we want to make sure that we have both green lights on for the purge control. Those are the two blue wires that we just hooked up. If we're into the system, the green lights will be illuminated. That means we can control it. Now let's go ahead and raise the car up so we can get into the vent solenoid with the two yellow wires. Then we can test this vehicle. On this Ford F-150, the carbon canister is located behind the rear axle above the spare tire. The vent solenoid wiring is buried. You can't hardly touch it. I can see where the wiring harness goes up to it, so I'm going to get into the wiring harness and I'm going to back probe them. This will save me a lot of time. I just want to close the solenoid so I can test the system even to see if it's leaking. If I need to get up there, I'm going to have to tear this car apart. I never like to move any pieces on a car until I know it's leaking or not. So we're going to get into the wires. Once you wire pierce them, when you take your piercers out, just liquid tape them. The wires will be fine. Now that we've controlled the vent solenoid in the rear with the two yellow wires, we need to make sure that the smart control sees that we're into the wire, that we've back probed it correctly. We can see that the LEDs are on. These are the green ones. That indicates that we're in the wire. Now we can control the vent solenoid to close the system. So first we want to feed the CO2 into the system. So we're going to open the CO2 regulator and we're going to start to feed it. Now what we want to make sure is that we don't start to build pressure, because once we open it, if we start to build pressure quickly, it's plugged. Now that we're okay, we're going to close the solenoid and we'll start to see that the gauge is going to climb. Now this vehicle has a 30-gallon tank. It's a very large fuel tank. It's going to take several minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes, in order to fill and pressurize the system. So we're going to go ahead and let this pressurize, and then when we get to pressure, we'll be able to see if we have a leak or not. If it goes into the green, there's no leak present. If it's in the yellow or the orange or the red, we have a leak present. The other thing is we want to make sure that the gauge is coming up as we're applying pressure into it. We can see we do have a raise in the pressure. Now that we've waited several minutes for this large fuel system to pressurize, we're in the yellow. Now in the yellow is an indication that we have a very small leak, and that correlates with the DTC that this vehicle has. So what we need to do now is take the leak detector and go around this system and try to find where that leak is located. We've turned on the leak detector. It takes about 1.5 minutes for the tip to get warm enough to work. It will go from a red light to a green light once it's ready to work. Now that we've obtained the green light, we're going to adjust the sensitivity on here. This compensates for the CO2 in the atmosphere. What we want to do is we want to adjust it right below where we can hear the sound. When it's got a little bit of sound or right below it, that's the right place. I usually adjust it to like this, to where I can hear it barely whining. That will mean that it's as sensitive as we can get. And this is a small leak, so we want it sensitive. When we go around the car, we want to move the probe slowly. Don't go too fast, but you can go pretty quick. So let's go ahead and look at this vehicle and try to find where this leak is. Now that we've checked the components under the car, the fuel tank, senders, the fill necks, the canister purge, the lines, we haven't found any leaks. So we need to drop the car down and we need to check the gas cap and the components that are up in the engine compartment. We've checked the entire rest of this car and we don't see a leak at this time. We need to check the components in the engine compartment to see if they might be leaking. I've already checked the gauge again just to make sure, and we're still in the yellow. This car does have a leak, so we need to find it. We're going to check the purge control valve and make sure that it's not leaking. We want to make sure that we also check the line fittings. We've located the leak, and it appears to be at the base of the purge valve in between the lines. What we need to do now is to find the exact location of the leak. In order to do that, we're going to use the Bullseye Leak Seeker solution. This is the red foam that will spray on, and it will turn yellow at the leak site. Now that we found the leak on this F-150, we know the purge control valve is no good. The housing is leaking. This is going to need a new purge control valve. To end this, we need to dump the charge, the CO2 we put into the tank. The best way to do this is to open the purge control valve so all of the fumes go into the motor, then nothing comes out externally. The engine might have a hard, cold start. When we're done, it's going to take a few more cranks to get it started, but it's way safer. Let's go ahead and do that. So now we're dumping the system into the intake manifold. We're finished. We need to put the valve on, and this car is repaired.